Hey guys, this is Professor Wagner. Those are my two boys. I'm sorry, they're up on my screen. We are going to go over 3 lectures. I'm going to do 2 different videos on them, and we'll sort of review them on Thursday and Friday when I come back to class. The first one we're going to talk about is normal pediatric development. This one is going to go fairly quickly because it is mostly all the information you need is on the slide itself. So just paying attention, I'll have a few snippets here and there, but I'm also not going to read it throughout the whole thing. So what is motor development? It's a process of change in motor behavior that is related to the age of the individual. This development of child's bones, muscles, and their ability to move around and manipulate his and her environment. This is changes in the posture and movement, and these changes caused by the development of that central nervous system. The more that nervous system grows, the more developed they become. The environment that your child is in will also play a strong role in how they develop, and the parental figures as well. Oh, and real quick, there are 2 types of development. There's 2 categories. There's gross and fine motor. Gross is these whole body movements, the walking, the running, the skipping. And then there's fine motor, which is grasping, holding a pencil, those kind of small detailed movements. Why is it important for us to understand? Well, really, you need to know how they develop so you can treat them. You can't expect them to walk at 6 months when developmentally they can't. They have to walk before they can run. And those are the kind of things that you're going to be looking for. It's important for you to know in treatment and in that aspect so you're able to treat them better. The changes in an infant motor behavior is really remarkable in that first year. And when you think about everything that happens, that child progresses from that helpless person to competence in gross motor, like sitting and crawling, all within that first year. So they're able to sit up. They're able to crawl, they're able to walk, they're able to grasp a toy, they're able to throw a toy, they can move the toy from their ground up to their mouth, they can, they're starting to make sounds. It's really, truly incredible when you think about it, when they go from that first stage all the way up to when their first birthday is. Does motor development relate to clinical practice outside of pediatrics? Well, physical impairments from a disease or trauma can affect a functional independence at any age. And it's important to understand really where they are sufficient and where they can move so that you're able to treat them better. And again, like I said, you can't expect them to do certain tasks if developmentally they're not ready for that. Understanding how one attains control over their posture and movements is useful for a therapist in any setting, because if you're understanding how that child or pediatric is able to do it, you're able to treat them. So motor development during infancy. Infancy is considered birth to the time when a child is able to stand and walk. Typically, this is 1 year. And that's just the definition. The neonate begins helpless against gravity and then gradually starts to develop by each body segment how that works. They can achieve that normal sitting posture and then able to understand how gravity defines them and how it works, how their body works against it. So a normal locomotive skills is rolling and then creeping and crawling, walking, and independent walking. So that first quarter is birth to 3 months. So when we think of that birth to 3 months, that posture of a newborn is typically flexed. Their knees are up, their arms are in, their body is forward. And that's because of just how they are in utero. Think about how that little baby has to be all curled up in a little tiny ball to fit in a mother's belly. When a baby is placed in a prone position, their arms and legs will curl up underneath their trunk, and then that weight will sort of go on their shoulders instead of on their belly. And again, they are just curling themselves up back in that position that they were fetally. From this position, that baby can develop one of the most important skills, which is actually lifting their head. That's really one of the biggest accomplishments they have within that first quarter. and so that they're able to breathe. Oh, it didn't move. Hold on. Oh, I went too fast. Sorry. So the first quarter supine position, if you place your patient or a pediatric patient on their back, their head and trunk will rest on a support surface, and typically their head is going to be turned to one side. It's just easier for them. They don't really have that control yet. Their lower trunk is flexed, so their butt is up off of the floor. When we lay on our back, typically our legs are straight out and our butts really rest on the bed or on the floor. They will bring their legs up to their chest, which brings their butt up off, and there's no contact. Again, both their upper and lower limbs are flexed, so their knees are flexed, their elbows are flexed, their body is in. And that, again, is just because of the position that they were in utero. If you pull their legs out or their arms out, it'll kind of do a rebound and it'll return to that flexion position. And it's termed the, quote, flexor tone. And by the end of the first quarter, the degree of flexion in the limbs has lessened. So by the end of 3 months, that sort of eases up a little bit, which is sort of where we are with Macklin right now. His arms aren't so flexed. Prone position, which is on their belly, the infant will be able to keep their nose and mouth obstructed to breathe. I find this a little bit questionable because they say don't lay a baby on their belly because of SIDS, but they are able to move it. It's an instinct reaction in our bodies. If our airways are blocked, we will instinctively move and react so our nose and mouth is clear. Again, their upper limbs are going to be flexed close to their body, and their lower limbs are flexed as well to keep that abdomen and their belly off of the bed. When awake, they spend much of their time actively extending their head and their trunk. Their head usually bobs up and down. Macklin likes to rub his face in the mat because he really hasn't liked tummy time. And closer to that 3 months, the on elbows posture becomes more frequent. In the first quarter, that birth to 3 months, the sitting and standing position, they can't sit or stand alone due to that inability of balance. They technically have the strength to do it, but their balance is so off. In sitting, they'll have a rounded back, head flexed and bobs. As you see, this is my son, Reed, my first son. He doesn't have the head control, so my mom was holding his head over. You'll see his back is rounded. Sorry. Sorry, I thought someone was knocking on my door. All right, so now we are looking at the second quarter. Let me go back one slide here. Supine position. This is starting, the second quarter is 3 to 6 months, and they're starting to get really active and moving. Their legs will start lifting off a supported surface and bring them up towards their face, towards their hands and their feet. As you see here, Reed was moving his feet towards his hands. There's a lot of inconsistent rolling. They're not trying to do it, it just happens. For instance, you see here Reed was bringing his feet up, and it just happened to roll on his side because of that weight of the legs to turn the baby. Usually the purposeful rolling is by the end of the third quarter. This is where they place feet flat on a support surface with hips and knees flexed, and they start the bridging position, which you may know of in exercising, where they just sort of bridge their butt up and over. The prone position looks a little bit more entertaining. The baby starts to struggle to elevate the trunk off that surface, but they spend time pushing up and then falling back down. And then they push up and fall back down. And typically there might be a pivot prone where it sort of looks like an airplane, where they push themselves up, but they fall down and they start turning a little bit. This is where the infant starts to play in on extended arms, and they start to begin to push up on hands and knees. Typically you'll see that near the end, but you just never know. Every child is different. There is a little bit of crawling where they move forward or backward by pushing or pulling with the extremities while the abdomen is on the ground. The second quarter sitting position looks a little bit like this. During this time, the infant develops a steady sitting posture. As you see Reed here, he's doing it on his own. He's not having any issues. And then begins by sitting alone while propped forward on hands, which is exactly what he's doing. He does have a toy in his hand, but he is leaning some of his weight into that position so he's comfortable. Legs will held in a ring position. His right leg is, his left leg is smushed out, but usually it's feet together and then it's like a loop. The second quarter standing position, the infant will start to accept weight through their lower extremities and can stand with support, usually either by holding or holding onto something around them. The soles of their feet are in full contact with the surface, and this is sort of a plantigrade position. If you think about a baby with their feet on the ground, sort of leaning forward, their butt back a little bit, holding on to something, that's the plantigrade position. And then you'll see them sort of bounce up and down because they're learning how to get that weight in their legs. The third quarter, which is 6 to 9 months, they're starting to learn to roll from supine to prone, and usually they don't really want to lay on their back anymore because it's more fun and they're doing more things sitting up and on their belly. Rolls either with their head and trunk extension or by flexing their lower extremity and using gravity to kind of whip them over and around. The third quarter prone position, the child starts to begin pivoting in circles, so they're turning themselves around to reach for toys or look at someone. Positions are very stable for the baby. They're comfortable. They are able to play more, and they're starting to do more lateral flexion through the trunk. So that is if you're standing there and you have your hands down on your legs and you slide your hand down on one side of your leg, that's a lateral flexion. So they're starting to get more comfortable and they're sort of bending their torso. So the third quarter sitting position, they're able to start to sit more unsupported with ease for as long as a half hour. They might start to lean forward on their hands, but you notice that they are using their hands more to play than for support at this time. I have here that they can shift weight laterally to pick up a toy, and this is what Reed is doing. He's starting to lean over to his side to reach that toy down by his left hand, or to look at me and wondering what I'm doing. And again, they are still in that ring sitting position at times. The third quarter, which is 6 to 9 months, they're starting to get in this quadruped position, which is their hands and knees. By the end of the third quarter, they're moving from sitting to hands. It's accomplished with ease. It's not real hard for them. They're able to do it. They will engage in a great deal of rocking. So this is where they're moving back and forth, but not actually moving across the floor. They're just shifting their weight from their hands to their knees. And then some children assume position of the bear walking on hands and feet instead of hands and knees. It's really dependent on the child. And I do have a video of Reed doing an army crawl. So remind me to show you when we come back to class. This is the plantigrade position that I was talking about earlier, where you see his hiney cheeks are out a little bit and he's leaning forward holding something up. And I'm sorry about the mess in the background. I think we were getting Christmas decorations out. They start to learn to pull from kneeling to standing with support, usually on the couch. This is our ottoman that he was leaning on. They need strength of their upper extremities to accomplish that, so it takes a little bit of time. Initially, they stand with their hips flexed, as you see, and they eventually learn to kind of tighten up their butt cheeks and pull their hips underneath them. Usually they don't have they're not really sure how to get down from here. So some will just cry because they don't know how to fall, but they will learn that just falling backwards will work for them. And they start cruising, and cruising is when they're walking while holding on to something, either a couch, chair, Tupperware bin, whatever they want to cruise on. The fourth quarter, which is 9 to 12 months, the supine and prone positions they're rarely in it because they're often going, either crawling or walking. This is rarely, it's more used for transitions instead of actually playing or being in them for long periods of time. They progress to the plantigrade creeping and will eventually progress to standing and doing it on their own. Sitting position, it's very functional. They're comfortable. It's with ease. It's not hard for them to do it. You might see this W sit, which is the illustration on the left. I can no longer sit like that. It's not really good for you. It's not good for children, I hear, because it's hard for children to play and turn laterally just because of the way their hips are positioned. Reed never really did it, but it is a comfortable position for kids. 9 to 12 months, the standing posture, it's now preferred because it's easy. They can move faster. They gain ability to move back down to sitting, which is functional and quick. And then they walk. Stepping usually begins in a diagonal direction instead of forward, and that gives a wider base of support. So if you think about how we walk with our feet straight forward, these are kind of going off on an angle. This is where they're starting to walk as well. They typically tend to walk on their toes, and then they laterally flex the trunk to advance the leg instead of shifting their weight. And we can demonstrate that in class as well. Their arms are held in a high guard, which is what you see here with his right arm. Their arms are up and not walking down by their sides, and they typically aren't able to carry a toy because their arms are up the whole time. And then real quick, we're going to walk through the primitive reflexes too. They appear and disappear in an expected order during infant development. They come and go at a certain amount of time. Usually if there's an absence of a reflex, there is some abnormal function of that nervous something is wrong. You'll see if you have children or see children at a doctor's office, they will be checking these reflexes to be sure that they are present and ready to go. All right, so the Moro reflex is also called the startle reflex. That reflex is triggered where if the head is falling backwards or in quick changing positions, those arms and legs will go out to the side and their neck will extend backwards, and then they will bring their arms back in and then they will start to cry. This is it's present at birth and disappears around 3 to 6 months. What they're looking for is that asymmetry. If it's not happening on both sides, then there's a problem. And if it's totally absent, then the reflex means there's some neurodevelopment issue. There's a grasp reflex, which is exactly what you think it is. If you're placing your finger or an object in an infant's hand, they will grasp it. It's very easy. That disappears within 5 to 6 months. If you pull away, their grasp will be stronger. And this also happens in the foot. So if you stroke the bottom of the foot, it causes that foot to flex and the toes will curl. And that one disappears by 9 to 12 months. That was an easy one to remember. The stepping or walking reflex. You hold the baby under their arms and support their head, and they let their feet touch a surface. Their infant will appear to take steps or walk. This disappears within 2 to 3 months, and then it reappears, which is interesting, when they're starting to learn to walk in 10 to 15 months. That one's also easy to remember. The positive support reflex. This is sort of like the stepping reflex, but if you hold them under their arms and their head, they'll extend their legs for about 20 to 30 seconds and then they'll flex again. This disappears with 2 to 4 months, and that becomes more mature reflex, again, where it's sustained that legs of support at 6 months, and that they can support their legs and their body. The asymmetric tonic neck reflex. It's where if the baby's head is turned to one side, that side, the arm which the head is turned towards, will extend and abduct with the elbow extended. The other limb will be abducted and externally rotated with the elbow flexed. So whichever way, and as you see in this picture, whichever way the head is turned, that arm will be straight and extended and the other arm will be flexed. You will need to know this one, so make a star at that one. The tonic labyrinth reflex. So this is where if the neck is flexed, the arms and legs will flex. If the neck is extended, the arms and legs will extend. This is present at birth and disappears within 2 to 4 months. As you see in the pictures, if the head is extended, both the arms and legs will straighten out, and if the head is flexed, everything will come in as well. The gallant reflex is when the infant is prone and you stroke the area on the back. It will cause the body to laterally flex. So if I stroke a baby's back on the left side, they will laterally flex on the left side, and the same with the right side. The parachute reflex, sort of like the Moro reflex, only standing. If they are suspended by the trunk and suddenly lowered as if they're falling, that child will extend and abduct their arms as a protective mechanism, and that appears at the onset of walking. Good luck studying. I just really liked this picture, so I had to include it. So I will load another video with the pediatric physical therapy. Okay, thanks. Bye, guys.